Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. It's great to be together for our first steering committee meeting in 2022. Thanks for joining us. We've got a terrific program for you today. Before we do that, I'd like to just mention we learned today that Mary Dowell passed away earlier this week. Many of you know Mary, and she served on our board, the MWI board, for many years, and actually was instrumental in bringing the Women's Leadership Coalition to our leadership collaborative together. It was one of her ideas probably almost 10 years ago to leverage our collective voice. And now we have the Women's Leadership Collaborative. So we all are remembering Mary fondly today, and as we've heard the news, and her family is certainly in our best wishes and our thoughts and prayers today. Also, we have several new steering committee members that are joining us today. I will say your name, and if you are joining us today, if you wouldn't mind just turning your camera on and your microphone on and just introduce yourself to the group. So we'll start with Sally Cartwright. Sally, are you with us today?
I am. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
Great. Could you just introduce yourself, Sally?
Sure. Sure. I just was coming on to the call right when you said my name, so I didn't know if you wanted me to say something. Anyway, nice to meet all of you and to be with you today. Sally Cartwright. I currently am a vice president with Lee Hecht Harrison here in the Wisconsin market, run the Wisconsin market for the firm, and new obviously to the group, and just very excited to be part of this and to help promote strong women leaders in Wisconsin.
Great, thanks, Sally. Nisha Ganta, are you on joining us today? Nisha.
Hi, I am. My name is Nisha Gandhi. I'm a VP of Abelite, formerly known as Bethesda Lutheran Communities. I lead our development and fundraising efforts across 13 states, as well as support all of our program operations for expansion. Super excited to be here today, and look forward to connecting with you all. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, Nisha. And then third new member joining us today, Alia Pitts. Are you on with us today?
I am.
Great.
I gotta find Nisha.
Great. Would you mind introducing yourself, Alia?
Sorry, I was having a hard time hearing. Yes, I'm happy to introduce myself. So yes, my name is Alia Pitts. I know some people on this call. So nice to see you all. And those of you that I don't know, I'm excited to meet you. I'm the Chief Advancement Officer at the Prairie School in Wind Point, which is just north of Racine, south of Oak Creek, where Kimberly Kane's kids went, and one still goes. So we have that connection. And I'm just really excited to be here. So thanks.
Great, welcome. Welcome to Milwaukee Women Inc. And then I believe we have one guest, Aaliyah Berman, guest of Lisa Cieslak. Aaliyah, if you are joining us today, if you could just introduce yourself.
Oh, this keeps. I don't see her name on here, Pat. Every time I click on Alicia, it scrolls goofy. I'll get you, Alicia, eventually. Not to worry.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Also want to make sure to thank our platinum sponsors, that being Waterstone Bank and Manpower Group. And then a reminder to all who participated in our workshops for our board bios to take an action item from those workshops and complete your bio and post it on the member section of our website. That database of our members and the skills that we all have and leadership qualities that we all have are important to our brand as we put ourselves out into the community, representing leaders in the community with regard to our mission for increasing the number of women on boards, and also provides a resource for those who are looking for potential board members, and also provides each of us resources to network among each other and to help each other if we have an inbound inquiry for either a board opportunity or an executive position. That database can be helpful and a place to start for looking for people for women that might have those skills. So encourage you to do that. And right now we do have 52 of our 100+ members that have their bios. So it'd be great if we could get near to 80 or 90 of our bios out there. And then lastly, where we are active on social media. So reminding all of you to like us on Facebook and on LinkedIn and Twitter. And with that, I will turn the program over to Kristen Dufek.
Well, hi everyone, and I'm excited really today, and I'm gonna introduce someone who probably doesn't need an introduction here to this group of women, but Kimberly Kane. She brought forward and led research that she's going to share with us today, and have a discussion with several of our MWI members to share insights on that. So without further ado, I'll just turn it over to Kimberly, who will introduce herself and the panelists.
Well, thanks, Kristen, and it is such an honor to be here. I've been scrolling through the gallery, and it's great to see so many faces, so many people that I haven't seen live and in person for so long. So I look forward to hopefully soon, getting back to those in-person meetings. Just a quick little bit of background for you about me. I was a reporter with WTMJ TV for many years, and then got into work in the business world. So after leaving TV news, I had 4 children. I got into work in the business world and started Kane Communications Group. After I spent about 6 years working in executive search. So my work in executive search and recruitment actually comes very much into play in terms of what we're talking about related to the talent crisis and related to retention. So as we begin to see this talent crisis kind of really sweeping the nation, I looked at things through the lens, both as a strategic communicator and as someone who spent so many years working with companies to solve talent problems. During the talent crisis that we are in today, I think, we're all seeing that there are some, big challenges that we would like to address. And I think the research that we have done, my hope is that it does more than open the eyes of company leaders to the importance of retaining women, but that it also helps us affect sustainable workplace change that addresses issues that are barriers to women in the workplace and that have been barriers to the success of women in the workplace for generations. I've added here at the bottom our handle, which is KaneCom Group, and also the hashtag Kane Insights to this slide in the event you want to post about what we're talking about and what you're learning on social media, because raising awareness is one of the most important parts of bringing about change. Just a little bit about Kane itself. We are a purpose-driven branding, marketing, and public relations agency that builds, activates, and protects reputations for organizations around the world. We like to help solve real business problems using communications. Our mission at Kane is to elevate purpose and earn trust for good. Earning trust for good means that we help our clients earn trust among their stakeholders for the good work they're doing. But earning trust for good also means that there's some finality here. Beyond the campaigns that we do with our clients, beyond design and storytelling, we want our clients' brands to mean something and to resonate long-term, because that is what drives lasting results. We believe that communities thrive when businesses are guided by their purpose, and we carry that belief through in our process, which you'll see here. So let's dive into the agenda. I want to show you just an overview of how I hope we spend our time together today. I'm going to share some background to set the stage for the research, then get into the research, including the methodology, our findings, and our recommendations. Then we have an exciting panel discussion on the other side of the research with 3 MWI members, and we'll then engage each of you in a breakout session and have a report out at the end of that. So I will try to make sure that we have time at the end for questions too. But as we're going, feel free to put any comments or questions into the chat. because myself or Maggie Kuhn, who is running the PowerPoint, may be able to jump in and get some answers to you right away as well. So let's set the stage. I think we can all agree that women play a vital role in business and in our economy. In fact, in 2009, the Harvard Business Review put it bluntly, and many of you may be familiar with the Female Economy Report they did in 2009. They said, women now drive the economy. In 2018, the World Economic Forum reported that when more women enter the workforce, everyone benefits. You know, companies see greater productivity, they see greater growth and efficiency, and even the income of men goes up because of these gains. In 2019, I was preparing for to moderate a panel discussion with Biz Times, and I saw this report come through from Morgan Stanley, where they noted at that time that women were earning bachelor's degrees at a higher rate than men, and they are the primary breadwinner for nearly 30% of married households and nearly 40% of total US households. And I thought, gosh, we are gaining momentum and we are getting so much traction. 2019. And then 2020, our world changed. More than 2.5 million women dropped out of the labor force during the pandemic. And headlines like these headlines showed the disproportionate impact that the pandemic had on working women. Last summer was when the Great Resignation began. We saw waves of resignations that are being described as, you know, more people resigning from the companies they work for than any time in history. Month after month, records of resignations, you know, we've seen. And, you know, women have been leading this. Women are leading the Great Resignation. So as our clients started taking steps to bring employees back into their offices, back into work, really looking to, you know, get the lights back on and rev the engine of business, they started asking for our help. This was last summer, communicating the right message. Of course, they were seeing these headlines and they were concerned that if they said the right thing, or the wrong thing, if they took the wrong step, they would see waves of individuals resigning from their companies as well. So while nationally women were leading the Great Resignation and returning to the workforce more slowly than men, we went looking for data here locally. We wanted to see how the pandemic impacted working women in the state of Wisconsin, and that data didn't exist. So we decided to take on the research project and find out. Many people have asked, you know, Kimberly, why would your PR agency take on this kind of work? Is this a passion project for Kane or something that our clients asked us to do? And maybe Maggie, you can move over to the next slide. I think it's important for any company to really operate in line with its vision and its mission. So doing work like this is very much in line with the work we do to help our clients build purpose-driven brands and promote and protect their corporate reputations. But it's also in line with Kane's corporate citizenship commitment. Empowering women in the economy and closing gender gaps in the world of work are key to achieving the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And as a woman-owned and woman-led company, we look for ways constantly to advance these efforts here in the state of Wisconsin. Kane is a member of the UN Global Compact's USA network, and we're on our way to becoming a certified B Corp. So this work is in line with the work we do with our clients, but it's also very much in line with the fabric of who we are, our corporate citizenship. And I think, you know, if the pandemic has taught us anything, and you can go to the next slide, Maggie, it is that recruitment and retention are directly tied to a company's reputation. And we know that reputations are not merely stated, they are earned. So the Great Resignation, we have learned, is fueled by poor corporate policies, out of touch management, inadequate communication. And if as a company, you're consistently not able to retain employees, it is a reflection on your reputation. And, you know, my time working in recruitment, you know, I often ran into this as I was working with hiring managers or working with private equity. If people didn't know about your company and they didn't know what you stood for, it was actually harder for me to get them in, to get them to become employees. And if we didn't do the analysis internally to find out why we had such high turnover rates, what was it about kind kind of the company's position that was making employees not want to stay, it really did impact our reputation and our ability to bring in employees. So there's this direct connection here. And as a result of, I think, what we're learning through this great resignation and some of these challenges we're finding internally, is there's a great reckoning going on. Fast Company had a really great article out just recently about the great reckoning, as companies are now coming to terms with these issues and with their consequences. So, with this in mind, these issues were assigned to me, that there was a disconnect between employees and their employers, especially working women. And so we took this study on to identify the issues and trends, behind people's concerns with the traditional work environment, to help our clients make informed and responsible decisions to retain their employees, and especially women. In this post-pandemic era, we wanted to know, what does a modern day work environment look like that enables Wisconsin women to be at our best? Helping our clients take these kinds of intentional steps benefits their businesses in today's changing world, in a society that we know, they really expect companies to act in the best interest of their stakeholders. And the good news is, companies do well, research is showing, when they do good. So this is kind of the stage. This is setting the stage for why we did the research. I'll get into the methodology in just a second, but I'll tell you, and Karen Hung and I had quite a few conversations about this. When we did the analysis of the research and we found the dramatic statistics, such as the fact that the percentage of Wisconsin women considering quitting was much higher than the national average, I picked up the phone and I said, Karen, give me a gut check here, because these numbers are really standing out as significant or outstanding. And, it was after a few conversations like that we decided we wanted to share the research publicly, not just with our clients, so that organizations and companies around the state could see how Wisconsin's working women were faring in the wake of the pandemic. So let's go ahead and get into the findings. We grouped the major insights that emerged in the data into 6 categories. Those are listed here. Each of these categories has a featured spread in the report. If you've taken a look at the report, you'll see it's 2 pages for each one of these sections. And we also discuss insights of working women in general and positive actions employers can take to improve the lives of working women. Just a little bit about the methodology, because quite a few people have asked, how we went about doing this. We did a random sample of 980 working women here in the state of Wisconsin. That survey sample represents the demographic makeup of the state of Wisconsin, and we do have a graph at the beginning of the report that shows that demographic breakdown. We conducted the survey in July 15th through July 20th via telephone and text messaging. And the margin of error was plus or minus 3.1% with a 95% confidence interval. Kane drafted the research strategy and the questions, and then we partnered with an amazing woman, Catherine Wilson with Santiago Global, to actually conduct the survey itself. So we assessed current feelings of well-being, support, stress levels of women. We took a look at employer communication and satisfaction with jobs in wider industries. And then we tested a couple of questions as well, which we'll get into in just a moment. Pulling up, the first slide of positive findings, one of the things we wanted to test is this concept of purpose. If you haven't heard of purpose-driven or purpose-led, I'd really recommend that you do a little bit of research, or maybe I can send Jackie some links. It's really a very important and growing business strategy. And we wanted to know how important it was to working women here in the state of Wisconsin to work for a purpose-driven organization. You can see it is important. 86% of Wisconsin working women believe they do work for a purpose-driven organization. 88% not only believe that it's important to work for a company that is intentional about making a positive impact in the world, but 78% believe their organization is actively pursuing this goal. I also found it interesting that respondents were consistent regardless of their political leaning. We see so much in the news media about the divisiveness, right? The polarization, but The working women that we polled in the state of Wisconsin were very consistent, especially as it relates to the importance of communication from their employer and the importance of social impact. So you'll see down here in ITAL, across the board, 89% of working women believe communication from senior management is important to their job satisfaction. 25% are not satisfied with the level of employer communication, and they just don't think their employer keeps them informed. So it's another big lesson, I think, coming out of COVID, how important over communicating is with employees. Taking a look at the next slide, some of the concerning findings that stood out, this top one really was in the headlines, and that is 50% of working women in Wisconsin consider quitting constantly, often, or sometimes. That number is 25% higher than the national average. We compared against the Wisconsin or the McKinsey Working Women Report in 2021. The number one reason that women are considering quitting across every demographic is because they feel undervalued in their current job. And we can talk about what undervalued means, but that's the primary reason that women are considering quitting their jobs. Almost half of women reported difficulties balancing work and home responsibilities. More than 20% report being somewhat or very unsatisfied with current work arrangement. This speaks to the flexibility or lack thereof, the additional pressures and expectations put on the shoulders of women during the pandemic. And as we took a close look at some of the different sectors, the industries that women who responded to the survey represent, we did find a few, what we call them sector setbacks. Manufacturing, transportation, energy, and ag is one that stood out as an area, an industry that has some work to do engaging women and helping them feel valued. So 42% of women in this MTEA industry conglomerate disagree that their employer cares about
What are you doing?
versus 23% of women across all industries. And let's get into the next set of concerning findings. As you get into some of these findings, so these findings all represent, again, the different spreads that we have in the report. Stress and mental health across the board was a consistent area of concern for women who responded to the survey. Employer policies, women said, are really not reflective. They're not modern. They're not reflective of women's needs today. So 1 in 5 Wisconsin working women disagree that their employer's policies support mental health. 1 in 4 Wisconsin working women disagrees their employer actually cares about their mental health. So 25% of Wisconsin working women actually believe their employer doesn't care about their mental health. That's concerning to me. Stress levels are very high for working women in the state of Wisconsin. So according to the McKinsey report, about 50% of working women feel stressed, but in Wisconsin, that number is 68%. That's 36% higher than the national average. And once again, you get into the MTEA space and you see 78% of women working in this space feel elevated stress levels. So that's our experience when it comes to stress and the policies and the experience of mental health in our companies. But it's important also then for employers to recognize that stress impacts productivity. So 61% of working women agree that stress impacts our ability to be productive at work. So that's potentially a business metric there that is concerning. When we take a look at women of color, we saw some real discrepancies that I believe we all have a responsibility to understanding and being very intentional about addressing. So in terms of communication, 23% of all women surveyed disagree their employer communicates a clear call to action. However, 40% of African American women disagree their employers communicate a clear call to action. In terms of values, 80% of all women believe their organization's actions align with its purpose and values, but only 63% of African American women believe that. In terms of feeling undervalued, 42% of African Americans cite feeling undervalued in their current role as the primary reason they think of quitting their jobs. And 29% of Hispanic and Latinas polled actually left their jobs because they feel undervalued. So those are really stunning statistics and very important for us to take seriously, pop the hood on what's going on and find out what's not working in our companies. And this last statistic really stood out to me as well. So it's one thing to feel undervalued. It's one thing to feel disconnected at work, but African-American women are twice as likely to feel discomfort about even talking about their challenges with their teammates and managers. So there's a discomfort with communicating about some of these. So these are important statistics for us to keep in mind. Getting into the next segment, working mothers, also some concerning findings here. Work-life balance, only half of Wisconsin working women have jobs that offer flexible hours or work from home options. In terms of childcare, this is a huge number. 81% of working moms have jobs that offer no childcare support. And when we talk about childcare support, they don't have access to affordable childcare that is close by, or that makes it easy for them to have their children in, again, affordable, high quality childcare environment, so that they can get to work. It's a real challenge for women. In terms of paid family leave, fewer than half of Wisconsin working women have jobs that offer paid family leave. And stress levels, not surprising, working moms in Wisconsin experience 12% more stress than Wisconsin women who don't have children. And the final real pullout section in terms of concerning findings was Gen Z. So when we did the survey, we, of course, grouped different generations. And I'll tell you, women who self-identified as Republican and Democratic have more in common than women in general and Gen Z. So this generation, those of us who work with Gen Z, we know they are connected, they're plugged in, and they have very strong opinions. In terms of equality, nearly half of 18 to 29-year-old women disagree their employers value women as equally as men. In terms of being connected or disconnected at work, this generation is twice as likely than the average to strongly disagree that they work for a purpose-driven organization, and strongly disagree that their employer cares about their mental health. So they're just not feeling connected to their workplace. In terms of communication, they also, believe that their employers are not keeping them informed. So they're twice as likely than the average to strongly disagree their employer is communicating with them. And, we know this generation is not really committed to staying in a job and growing with a company. And we saw that in the survey. So 18 to 29-year-olds think of quitting their jobs nearly twice as often as the average across all age groups. So these are some concerning findings that the report goes into, and we have recommendations as well. I was, blessed that we had as many women as we did who were open and eager to come together with us in a series of work groups. So some women who are, on this call right now joined us at our offices at the end of October to walk through these findings. We broke up into work groups, we discussed the findings, and we put together recommendations. We had some women join us through virtual work groups like this, and I met with some women one-on-one. So these 4 recommendations here are just a small sample of recommendations that we have packed into the report. For working moms, women, we really believe it's important for companies to modernize parental leave policies to make them gender neutral. We found almost 20% of working moms in our survey self-identify as LGBTQ, and women want as much kind of recognition that parenting it's a 2-person responsibility and opportunity, not just a mom's responsibility. So let's modernize those policies. For overall women's stress and mental health, making positive recognition part of the culture is vital. We saw when we took a look at levels of education, we don't have a separate spread on this, but we could create one. There's some real discrepancies in terms of how women who don't have college education feel in the workplace than women who are college educated. So women who don't have college degrees were less likely to say that they receive positive recognition than women who do have college degrees. So, making positive recognition part of your culture is very important to engaging women. For women of color, combat implicit bias by tracking race and gender across all recruitment and promotion, and hold yourself accountable to this as well. And for Gen Z, ensure that your brand is purpose driven. We know social impact is very important to this generation. And so this generation and women as well, they want to be part of companies that are not just producing great products or doing great things. They want to know they're part of companies that are doing good in the world as well. So this, again, is just a small sampling of the recommendations, and there are dozens more in the report. I want to highlight one other vital recommendation, and that is this concept of purpose. Again, we put some questions about purpose into the survey because we wanted to see how important it is to women, and we saw that it's extremely important to women. So in a letter to the companies that BlackRock invests in, BlackRock's CEO, you may be familiar with Larry Fink. He writes this letter to the CEOs of companies they invest in every year. In 2019, he really called out purpose. And he said, purpose is not a mere tagline or a marketing campaign. It is a company's fundamental reason for being, what it does every day to create value for its stakeholders. We're seeing that the most successful businesses emerging today, emerging from the pandemic, recognize that profit is connected to purpose, and so is employee engagement and retention. I mentioned that Fast Company article. I went doing a little bit of research about the Great Reckoning, and I was surprised and pleased to see the connection this article made between purpose and the Great Reckoning. They talked about how purpose is now table stakes for any company that wishes to be relevant, competitive, and at the highest levels beloved. Those organizations without a clear purpose are already behind and can expect to face a great reckoning of their own in the year ahead. So, I think as leaders, as we're thinking about this research, we're thinking about what to do to ensure our companies retain women, I think it's important for us to go down to the core and really evaluate what is the purpose that drives our companies. I'm thrilled that since we launched the research in December, we have obtained more than 60 media placements. We've had dozens, if not close to 100 people who have downloaded the report so far. So we know people are paying attention. We know people are interacting with this information. And it's been interesting to hear from women as well as they've looked at the report and the findings. They have said to us, we've heard the word validated a lot, that they feel validated by these findings. So the pandemic shined a light on all the ways work is not working for women. And we know that working women are taking a stand and they're acting like this, or they're acting on this like never before. Collectively, we can't afford this to be just a one-off blip and allow the world, of work to go back to business as usual. So the opportunity, I think, before all of us is to impress upon corporate leadership. And in some cases, we are corporate leadership, right? In some cases, in many cases, corporate leadership is male in the companies that we work for. We need to work for, we really need to impress upon them that this kind of the traditional approach to the workplace needs to evolve. At a time when corporate reputations are being evaluated through a human lens, I think we're learning that this is a business imperative, or research certainly shows us that. And this is where all of you come in. So the research is only going to be effective when it is turned into action. So it's my pleasure now to be able to bring a few more voices into this conversation. I'll take a break from the PowerPoint itself and put the spotlight on our three panelists. So I know you know them all well. They're Cecilia Gore, Executive Director of the Brewers Community Foundation, and a board member with Town Bank, a Wintrust Company, and C.G. Schmidt. Mara Swan, Senior Operating Partner with Stone Peak, EVP Manpower Group retired, and board member. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water here. Uline, Gojo Industries, and Brightview Landscapes. And then Marilka Valles, Senior Vice President, Senior Director of Marketing, Associated Bank, Board Member Chair, the Milwaukee Women's Fund, and the Rotary Club of Milwaukee. I think my voice is telling me that I'm done talking, so I'm going to lob a question out to all of you to start with. My first question is your gut reaction to this research. What about this research stands out to you most?
Kimberly, I can save you there.
Thank you. No, I'll have to tell you guys, I had COVID last week, so I'm okay, but clearly I'm not fully recovered, and my voice is telling me that.
Yeah,
Marilka,
of course. Yeah, I'm sure we're all, it's crazy. We're all really being impacted by that now. And I wish you a speedy and full recovery. So to the question of kind of what stood out in the research, for me, of course, great to see the progress that Wisconsin companies are making. As a Latina myself, I have sensed that progress in my lifetime. I mean, I live in Wauwatosa, which is a neighborhood that, in the time that my parents moved here from Puerto Rico, they wouldn't even have been welcome in the neighborhood that my husband and I own a home in now. So I think that's great to see that progress. But then, seeing that number of, or that finding that 29% of Hispanic and Latino women in Wisconsin left their jobs because they felt undervalued in their current role. And that's 6 times higher than any other racial or ethnic group. I mean, obviously those aren't, I want more of me in the workforce, not less of me. And so that's definitely concerning. And I see, I think it makes sense when you also look at this as the population that is the highest of Wisconsin women of working women with children under 18. So you kind of see how all of these factors start layering into each other and have really created a moment of crisis.
Right. Thank you. Mara, what stood out to you? Oh, go ahead, Cecilia.
Go ahead. First, let me thank you, Kimberly. I'm glad you have an opportunity to take a break from talking. Congratulations on pulling this research together. I think what strikes me is that there's so many things that haven't changed. Mm-hmm. And I guess I can say that because I'm getting older and have been around for a long time, and we see that many of the concerns that were identified in your work are concerns that have been around for a long period of time. What I appreciate about you pulling this together is that it gives us another opportunity to put these issues on the table and share them with leaders and have discussions like we're having today to try once again to make some change.
I would echo that. First, thank you, Kimberly. I think every time we can bring this issue to light, it's important because we keep doing it and nothing changes. And maybe that's part of age, along with Celia, that I feel like. When I looked at it, I was thinking there's nothing new and we've known about it, but one thing that we do have that's changed is COVID has exacerbated the issues. And I think the thing that made me a little bit sad, I guess, when I read it, is that women so much want to be part of the workforce and they want to contribute their gifts, but they feel like the trade-off isn't worth it anymore. And I think that's really sad because that's a lot of wasted economic power and a lot of wealth for families, because women, as you noted in your research, lots of times are big providers for their family's wealth. And so that I find really disturbing because I think that will have a knock-on effect to kids and the next generation.
Thank you.
The one thing I would add to that, Mara, though, that could be a bright light is that women have decided that they can make their way in other ways. They can start businesses. Entrepreneurs have increased. I think people are determining their destiny differently than they have in the past. And so, although there will be challenges, I hope that we'll have many breakthroughs as well for women as they look at how they will support their family and create wealth.
Yeah, hopefully they'll get better funding, because right now a lot of the women who've got ideas don't get funded the way men get funded. So another problem for another day.
I think one important point that brings up, and Marika, this is something you and I talked just a little bit about too when we connected last week, is, maybe women are not advocating for themselves ahead of time, and maybe we don't find out about some of the challenges that women are facing. Maybe their life circumstances have changed, and they leave instead of bringing those kind of concerns, laddering it up to their supervisor. Marika, you had a couple of
yeah, we had talked about that because I've certainly I lead a team of creative marketing professionals, and certainly have experienced the impact of the great resignation on my team, and it's hard. And one of the things that has been really frustrating about some of those resignations is that they're really talented individuals. And Mara, to your point, people that we've invested in, right? I've invested in, or other leaders have invested in developing. And there's just this kind of this burnout that happens. And it's just like, I can't do all this, which of course is understandable. Nobody can do it all. But it's at that point in the break that someone has, decided and moved on or figured out something else. And it's just a decision that's made. And what's been really hard and frustrating is having the conversation sooner of, this isn't working for me, but here's what maybe could work for me. It's interesting that it's as we talk about continuing to raise awareness of this, part of that awareness is even empowering people to have that conversation, or sort of shifting, no one wants to yield. It's not in human nature to yield power, but the power is in the workforce's hands more than I think it ever has been. I can attest to that from the retention, moves and offers that we've had to make. But as Kimberly was saying, is, I really wished that that was more open and more part of our culture. And it certainly wasn't a taboo, that it wasn't if I'm not operating at 110% productivity all the time, that you're not even going to want me. Right. I feel like we're so hard on ourselves, instead of shifting it and saying, well, here's what I could do. And here's my offer. Here's my proposal. Here's when I think I can work and available, and the amount of workload I could take on. And it is kind of a take it or leave it, right? If you were going to leave anyway, or you have some other things you're considering, I think that might be one thing that I wish was more a part of the conversation. And I was actually able to retain one person who's going through exactly this, a young working mother, and had actually decided she's going to go work part-time on a contract basis for someone else. And I kind of said, well, what about working part-time for us? You keep your tenure, you keep your benefits. She was going to go somewhere with no benefits.
So creating kind of an environment where you have more open communication and women feel that they can speak out.
We should look at more, I just wanted to comment on that, because I think there's two things about that. There's a policy issue that could be helpful with that. And then I think there is a management issue. I think putting on that burden on the employee is a little unfair, because it's too much power between you and your manager. I think it's best right now, particularly, is managers need to check in with people. Are you doing okay? And asking them, they need to know these things, because you should be able to identify that these people are struggling before they are struggling. And the second thing I would say is we should really use leave policies more. There are sabbaticals you can give people. You can give them paid or unpaid sabbaticals where people just need some time to chill out so they can come back full. And I think there's some policy stuff that could be done that would help in that situation. So
and that follows what I was thinking, Mara, beyond just the organizations that women work in. I think we need to push out and look at the systems that are in place for us to function in workplaces. So you look at childcare, you look at the educational system, you look at all of the systems that we are connected to that really have an impact on our ability to be quality employees. And I believe that if we look at this issue a little bit differently, that we might have a greater outcome.
Yeah, elder care is another good example, because once you're done with children, then you got that issue.
But we can't look at it one-off. We can't point to the employee and suggest that they can solve that one issue. We've got to look broadly at what is wrong with the way that our systems are structured that are not allowing women to thrive or people to thrive as well as they could.
I think that gets us into the next question, which is, it comes from the top, right? And so, I'm hearing, unfortunately, from a lot of women, they have seen the research, we talk about the research, and then they kind of put their heads down. They look down at the ground and they say, but, my boss's head is in the sand, right? They're not paying attention to this. Things are just going to go back to the way that they used to be, because, my boss or leadership here, they're not taking this seriously. What is it that's blocking executive leaders from embracing this information and affecting change for women in the workplace?
I'll start. I'll break my rule of 3, because I always like to have no more than 3, but I think it's a little bit more than that. I would just a general category of apathy, because I think in lots of cases when I've talked to leaders, there's one is that they're overburdened with what's going on with COVID. They're in the day-to-day and they're not thinking about tomorrow. I think there's some dreaming that we're going to go back to the way it was, as you had mentioned earlier, Kimberly, and I think a lot of are in that mode, and it may be just what you do when you're in the middle of a change moment. I think there's some general acceptance that this is just a way of, women had to take more on during COVID and this happened, and that happened, and it's probably not going to be a big issue at my company, so it's somebody else's issue. I think that's a little bit of it. And then I think the other one is it just hasn't hit people in a conscious way, their pocketbook. So if you go back and look at when Deloitte started all the work they did around women in the 1990s, they only did it because they had 50% of their workforce was women, and they were quitting it. They were investing all this money in, and they were quitting right at the point where they had good return coming. And then they started doing something because they financially could see the difference. And I think that's a big piece of it. And I think that, you're going to, until you see, companies don't act until they really see it in their pocketbook. You can say, I morally think this is a horrible thing, or we should, but in general, there are some companies that don't, but in general, companies don't do it. And then I think the last one is they just don't know how to solve the problem, because it's not an easy problem to solve. Because I think, as Cecilia told you, part of it's the infrastructure around women. Can you solve the daycare problem? Works until your kids are 5, and then your kids are in school 40 miles away where you live. It doesn't work. And so there's no easy solution to it, I think, is the other thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that companies are feeling it. There's clearly a labor shortage. The wages are going up. There's more control that employees have about suggesting what it is that they'd like. I think that we have an opportunity to set the table a little bit differently. And given that the people on this call, many are in governance roles, it provides an opportunity for directors or other senior leaders to bring information like this to the table and begin a conversation and help create that roadmap so that we can do some things differently.
Yeah, it's just what I was going to say. It's just complicated, though, because I think businesses look for simple answers, and there's not a simple answer.
And that's okay. It's time to evolve.
Yeah,
Right.
But I think what's good for you said is start the discussion and start making some steps forward on some things. And I think you can ask your women in your company, and every company has a little bit different depending what the work is. What's one of the biggest roadblocks for them, and you can get the data.
Yeah.
And
I think Mara.
Yeah, before we jump in.
I'm gonna build a little bit on what Mara said. I would say maybe a little different way that there's just a clash of old school and new school thinking right now, right? When we think of the majority of people that are in executive leadership positions, where they are who they are in gender and where they are in their life, they're pretty out of touch with this. So that the apathy is definitely coming through. Maybe the denial, right? Of we're not going back. We can't go back. I experienced this myself, and I have pretty forward thinking leader. And, he was kind of waxing nostalgic about being in the office and being together in collaboration and looking forward, and expressing some of his expectations about the return to office and the availability of people in office. And I said, yeah, may I offer a different point of view? And he kind of, took a step because he knew it was coming. He was like, oh, here we go. And I did mention that I, kind of some perspectives on, I don't know that I just cautioned, us in leadership positions of how we're going to message that, because it's going to land really differently with different audiences. And that we could be perceived as, being out of touch or not responsive with what's happening and the real challenges of the expectations of the workforce, and especially the younger workforce, and then also the realities of what's happening right now, especially as we see, dependable childcare, dependable schools being open that's not a reality yet. So it's, and I think that I think someone in the chat, Irene, mentioned that kind of how do we get more men involved in the conversation? It may be, some of those lines of, hey, can I offer a different point of view, or can I share my experience or what I'm seeing, might be a way to help bridge some of that kind of old school, new school clash that's happening right now.
And maybe some new thinking. One of the things I'll tell you, because being on a board where we can't get women in warehousing jobs, and when you look at it, it's the principle of just in time, which is a core part of the business, because just in time means you have to finish the delivery. You can't go home at 5 o'clock. The delivery comes in, you've got to stay, and that women can't do that. So my whole thing is, well, can't you divide the job up and do it differently? So I think there's some things where if you can't keep hoping for something that's not going to happen, and they want to keep the job that way because that's the most efficient way to do it. But they're going to have to get at some of these principles and their business principles, just in time. How do you structure a job so that you can have scheduling control? It's a big issue for women in manufacturing. Huge issue, attracting women in manufacturing and keeping them.
Yeah. I'd like to go ahead and bring the entire group into the conversation now. So Mara, Marelka, Cecilia, thank you so much for your insights. And I had a list of questions I was hoping we could get to, but these insights were so important. We'll get to, I think, bring some of these questions to the group to have a conversation about. So thank you very much for being part of this panel. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot with some of these questions.
Thank you.
So at this time, we're going to take a step back and about 10 minutes or so to break into small groups to talk about your ideas for advancing this research to affect change. So we were getting into, I think, some very important points in the conversation we were just having, and we'd love to get everyone's thoughts on these as well. So these are the questions that we would like everyone to really keep top of mind as we get into these breakout sessions. You might want to grab a pen and paper and write these down. But then I'd also like to have a note taker in your group as we break into these breakout sessions to have a conversation and then report out at the end. So I'm going to hand the reins over to Jackie and to Maggie, and you guys can take it from there. Well, we're going to get right into the report out. So I think if the people who took notes can raise their hand at the bottom of the screen, let us know who the note takers were. And we've got about 2 minutes for each of you to give us your report out. Maggie and Jackie, you guys can identify then who you want us to start with.
Yeah, why don't we start with Marilyn? Marilyn, you can unmute yourself.
Yep, unmute. Okay, let's see, 2 minutes. So several things we talked about, making sure we're taking this information that was shared today and educating as many people as we can, like boards that we sit on, organizations that we are part of. And then, and I'm going to credit Mara for this, a great suggestion of not just giving people the information or, talking about, but being able to say, what do you think we should be doing about this? And really getting people to have more of an action-oriented, mindset around it. Then we got into a conversation about leaders. We need better leaders, and how have the leaders had to change during this time of the Great Resignation, and getting them to think about how they need to do that. And then the last thing, and Lisa shared a really cool thing that they're doing And I won't even get into all of it, but the bottom line is helping. Maybe MWI needs to create like a portal where we could share ideas, and I'm calling it a portal. I don't know that we said that, but a place we said, I think, to share ideas. How are people handling these situations? How are your companies doing it? How are the boards you're on doing it? And also a toolkit, I called it a toolkit, but questions. What are the good thought-provoking questions we can ask the leaders in our companies, the boards that we're on, the leaders of the boards, to really get them thinking deeply about this and be willing to take action.
Excellent. Thank you.
Is anything else I missed from my group?
All right, thank you. We'll go to Kristen and after that, Nisha.
Sure, thanks. Hi, I was with Brenda Campbell, Sandy Wysocki, and Laura Gutierrez. And we talked a lot about just kind of the idea of being empathetic to where people are, and especially with the younger generation where they are, but also maybe taking the time to help them understand where we came from and how we grew in our careers and what that took, so that there could be maybe a meet in the middle with the idea of resiliency and teaching resiliency and teaching, you know, kind of grit and doubling down on a career and how that can benefit someone long-term. So it was kind of, you know, meeting people where they are, but also helping to, you know, to push and really mentor in a very strong and meaningful way. So that was really our conversation.
Thank you, Kristen. Nisha, would you like to go?
Sure, I'll add. So I'll echo some of what you heard, but we really talked about the importance of bringing this data forward, right? Creating awareness and education at a board level, an executive level within your organization, and then holding folks accountable, right? When we really think about accountability, how do we start to create that culture within an organization or an enterprise through creative discussion? You know, some ideas that came forward that were good were finding or getting a male sponsor advocate, right? That can continue to be that shared voice with you, demonstrating a shared purpose, talking about how we model what we say, right? So when we really think about not only living that, right, but modeling it every day, word choices, permission to ask for help, permission to seek, right? We always hold ourselves so accountable to do everything all the time. Mom, parent, friend, you know, loved one, caretaker. It's okay to give yourself permission to ask for help when needed, and making sure that you model that. Being good listeners, really creative, crucial conversations, and being conscientious about what that looks like. And just one other area, right? When we talk about shared purpose and voice, being also mindful that you don't have reverse biases as a result of the data, right? So making sure that we continue to really drive a culture that's inclusive of all and wanting to elevate everyone in your organization to have the same benefits. So that's what we talked about in our group.
Great, thank you. Lisa, and then we'll go to Amy.
Sure, thanks for calling on me. We had quite a discussion, and it of course incorporated many of the things that have been said by other groups. We did talk about how some things have changed and that arc of history is informing us and providing us optimism for change to come in the future. But if we just looked at last week or last month, well, nothing's changed. But if we look at the arc, many of us can tell stories about what's changed from when we entered the workforce and where we are today. There was some talk about apathy and the need for empathy. We had a conversation about what do we have to do to help people create voice. It was pointed out that women are not very good at negotiating on the front side of employment. So what would convince us that they would be willing to negotiate now when they're trying to exit the workplace because of pressures? So how do we help them create voice? And then the last thing I think that we ended with a big explanation point is maybe we could create a platform of women-informed policy recommendations or system recommendations that each of us could carry around and disseminate in our circles of influence. And if I miss something, anybody in the group, feel free to chime in with your hand raised as well.
Thank you, Lisa. Amy.
All right, so I'll try to skip over ones that have already been mentioned. As usual, Heather Dunn is ahead of the curve and is planning to do some version of stay interviews with her colleagues, her whole team this year. So that is a really important tool to try to, rebalance that power and keep people we want to keep. It can be hard to take up the hard conversation in your workplace, but to see this as an opportunity to be that leader who's looking forward and seeing the field really well, and whether you ultimately can affect change today or not, to be someone who is spotting the important issues for your workplace. When you're running into a position where you're hitting a wall, where, for instance, someone says, like, we don't want a two-tier workplace, we want everybody to have the same rules, to remind people it's a trade-off, and to formulate it as a would you rather. Would you rather have a one-tier workplace where everybody has the same rule, or would you rather see women exiting our workplace more quickly? Just positioning it in that way. We talked about, if you can't win the war right now, you might be able to win the battle by getting alignment on what are the metrics when we will revisit this. So you're not ready to make changes today if we see our retention numbers of women drop by 5% or 8%, or how can we get alignment on when we'll revisit this question? And then a great point from people that, a lot of organizations have charitable giving, caring about charitable giving, advocating in your companies that charitable giving aligns with this work and coming up with systemic issues in your company as well. Lisa, you had a board member doing good advocacy.
Thanks, Amy. Was there a sixth group that someone took notes in? All right, then I think we're finished, Kimberly, with the breakout rooms. If you want to close your presentation, I'll screen share one more time.
All right. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I was taking copious notes. I couldn't keep up with all of the great ideas. So I'm glad we're recording this conversation because there are a lot of opportunities for us to stay engaged and impact change. A few of the ideas that we have had related to kind of continuing this conversation and impacting change would be, to do what I think every one of you has talked about, and that is discuss this at your own organization. There are free tools that can be used, to conduct surveys, and we have some great resources online at caneinsights.com as well. So discuss this at your own organization. Share the report with women starting conversations about the findings. You're welcome to invite us to present to your organization as well. We presented to a workforce development board this morning. It was a fantastic conversation. We have so much more data that didn't make it into the report. It was just getting too big, but we could take a look at vertical markets, and we can also do demographic breakdowns if those are things that you would be interested in. We'd love for you to share positive progress that you have seen with us at your organization. And we're happy to share, the content about your progress in our newsletter, sharing it out on our social media channels. And you're welcome to, share other ideas with me. Here's my email address. Feel free to contact me at that email address. I really do hope you find me on LinkedIn as well. It would be great for us to be connected on LinkedIn. So these are some of the ideas that we had related to staying involved. And we plan to keep this conversation going. If you sign up for our newsletter, there are a lot of issues that we're writing about and we're hitting on. We can profile your organization as well. We've had the chance to connect with quite a few people who are doing some great things in their organizations. And we're just such a big believer in sharing best practices. So one of those things we want to do on the 18th of February is talk about becoming an employer of choice. So, we've heard about employers that maybe not be employers of choice, but we want to hear from employers that are employers of choice. These are companies that women want to work for and stay with. So we'll have a group of panelists who are talking with us about that as well. And as we close, I want to thank all of you for joining us. And I really want to thank our panelists as well, Cecilia, Mara, and Maroka. Thank you for putting up with my coughing fit at the beginning, but answering those questions and sharing insights from your personal perspectives. It's enlightened all of us, as well as the breakout session here at the end. So download the report if you haven't seen it, and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you for letting us have so much time at your meeting today.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was excellent. It started as, a a project of altruism by you. And thank you for your leadership and your hard work on this journey and sharing it all with us. That really, it took time, I know, to prepare. And unfortunately, our plan was to do it in person, but the world sometimes has different ideas in mind, and we just have to adapt to those. So this, I thought, was masterfully led by you, and really appreciate your professionalism. So thank you. And on behalf of MWI, thank you all for joining us tonight. And fingers crossed, we will be back together one of these days very soon. So stay healthy, stay well, and good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.